Dear audience of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I, Dr. Kausar Ahmed, welcome all of you from Winnipeg, Canada. Today we have a special day and we have invited human rights activist Ms. Aisha Ghazi from London, UK. And after we start, I will introduce her formally. And before we actually begin our webinar, which is titled today, The Most Unwanted People in the World Look into the World's Largest Refugee Camps, a documentary produced by Ms. Aisha Ghazi. So, folks, Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Metis Nation. We all are promise bound to work with our Indigenous brothers and sisters in the true spirit of reconciliation. Having said that, dear audience, it is my privilege to welcome Aisha Ghazi. And let me introduce her formally. I know her for some time, and she was very kind, appearing a number of times in my class that I teach at the University of Winnipeg Political Science Department. Aisha Ghazi is a human rights activist, a practicing lawyer, a documentary filmmaker, a poet, and an avid reader of specifically interested science, history, and philosophy of existence. Her academic background is Master's in Social MSc in Medical Molecular Biology, University of Westminster, UK, Graduate Diploma in Law and LLM in Legal Practices, University of Law, UK, and Certificate in Documentary Filmmaking and Video Editing from Film and TV Academy, London. She has produced numerous documentary works, and especially when I invited her to speak to my classes and also in Peace Days Rotary Festival in Winnipeg, we were very much interested about her documentary that she produced in north of Pakistan about drone and drone warfare of United States of America and how it impacted the population there. So this was my exposure to her. But beside that, she also runs and manages her website is called iresistglobal.org, iresistglobal.org, and very shortly you will see the scrolling with the web link. So I would urge our audience to kindly visit and get exposed to her very creative and innovative work. And also she writes, and she has written beautiful Urdu poems. In English, these are called Whispers of Autumn and Delusion of Enlightenment. And I'd be very curious to listen to her, what she actually wrote about delusions of enlightenment, because in the West, we all actually love this word in many forms and shapes, etc. So, and our plan is today actually to listen to her in the initial part of our webinar, uninterrupted, about 10 to 15 minutes. And before we got into this live streaming, I actually requested her that we are interested to understand why she does what she does. And this is something very unique from her background, especially from UK, and she does it at her own accord. Is not that I know very well that she is not funded by MNCs or any organizations. So this is very interesting, and we are going to listen to her. And then, as I promised, and of course, our theme of today's webinar is Rohingya refugee camps and the plight of Rohingyas. So we listen to her statement, and then very briefly, 6 to 8 minutes, we will watch Filmmaker Diary. And this whole documentary is available in our website, iresistglobal.org. You can always view that at your leisure time. And again, when I invite her to speak to our audience, let me also tell you that Rohingya crisis is not very new. It is happening actually since 70s. And Bangladesh is the host of Rohingyas. It's the largest Rohingya camps in the world. And as Aisha visited and produced the film therein, you will see her insights. But as a researcher, and especially Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is involved in this research since 2017. If you visit our website, www.crric.org, you will find us in terms of our activities, not only knowledge production, but also policy support, convincing Canadian government to keep funding the refugee camps. And also we run schools for the female adolescent Rohingyas in the school, generously funded by Rotary International and Manitoba Council of International Cooperation. So we are deeply involved in this crisis supporting Rohingyas. And this is something what Aisha Ghazi terms one of the disastrous episodes of human history. Although we are very much fixated in the current conflict, but this is nevertheless very important. So without further ado, let me welcome Aisha to the studio. Aisha, floor is yours, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for my very kind introduction, and thank you so much for sharing your platform with me. Uh, it's more about, I guess, today's session is more about Rohingyas, and that is very much needed topic at the moment because the current crisis is not being spoken about anywhere. And rather, I would say not the current crisis. Crisis has been there for a while, but the current, the wave of violence in there has not been spoken about. You can hardly hear it resonating anywhere in the international news or in the international conscious. I would say more accurately. So I think this is something very important to talk about it right now in these days because specifically about me, I pick up the topics that are not spoken about, that are forgotten topics, or the narratives that are not welcomed on the mainstream media. So that is the whole focus of my work. And how I came into this work, you know, leaving all the molecular biology and everything behind. How I came to this work was the basic reason because I believe that there is so much there is another side of story in every conflict, in every war, in every human trauma that is not being talked about. And as an individual, we leave everything to the state, we leave everything to the media channels, we leave everything to somebody else to do it, and nobody is happy to come up, yourself. Even as an individual, you exist. As long as you're alive, you exist, and your existence should matter, if not much, at least to some people. So there is a responsibility as an individual. If nothing is being said that needs to be said, that you should be saying it. So that was the main reason why I came into this field. Initially, I thought I'm just going to make one documentary, and that is going to be about the impact of drones in a northwest side of Pakistan, where there was a war on terror going on, and there was just one narrative, and there was nobody was talking about the ground realities, what was it actually doing there, how the terrorism and war was, aiding each other, and they were giving reason to each other. So there was a whole community that had no voice. So I thought, oh, okay, let's at least, if I can do something, I can record what's happening there in the time when it is happening, even if I can't find much of the audience because I'm just an individual. So this is where it started. And then, after one documentary, the other documentary, and then reports, and then had I had a default interest in refugee crisis somehow. Maybe I have inherited because my forefathers were refugees, and we had been, rushed out from Punjab. And in 1947, we had been, we left our lands in the Indian side, and then we had migrated with nothing in our hands, and Pakistan offered everything. So maybe that is something that is still persistent in the memory of my genes, being inherited. I have inherited that trauma of statelessness for a short while, and then the trauma of being a refugee, and trauma of leaving everything behind, and trauma of witnessing a massacre. So maybe that was the reason I could never, I could never isolate myself from what's going on around the world, especially regarding the war and the conflict. So I started working on with the refugees from different communities. Like I have worked with Afghan refugees in Pakistan, and and then the IDPs, internally displaced peoples, who were uprooted from their places due to the war. And then I worked with Palestinian refugees in Jordan and very briefly in Egypt. And then I worked with Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar. And then I visited them very briefly in Malaysia as well, just to make a comparison how their life is in Bangladesh and why do they take a, very risky journey in the boats to go to Malaysia if if they don't need to. So why, what was compelling them, and what was happening, and what was the comparison between both places? Uh, you know, um, embracing of the refugees. And then I worked in France with Syrian and Iraqi refugees in the Calais jungle. That was at one time one of the well, it was a jungle, and then Syrian refugees came over and Iraqi refugees came over, and we could find some Iranians there, and we could find a variety of ethnicities all living there in circumstances that you can't really find proper words to express how they must be living there. It's still a question for me. So this is what, so my whole work basically revolves around the human misery, the human trauma, and especially the sides that are not spoken about, like Rohingya refugees. That people have forgotten them. They were in 2017. The whole media focus was on them. So there was an aid, and there was some help for the hosting countries. And when there is a camera somewhere focusing somewhere, obviously the aid comes, the people come, the attention comes. So the crisis becomes a bit of, it feels like it is resolvable, and it's at some point in time it will be resolved. But once the camera is not there, they are just forgotten. Although the trauma is still there, rather worsened, but it's completely forgotten. But at the moment when we are all talking about the fire in Los Angeles and how the Hollywood sign is burning, and in just a few months ago that the whole villages and towns in the Rakhine were burnt down, but nobody spoke about it. Nobody really knows about it. What happens, other than the people who are keeping themselves updated about it. The human misery should be, treated equally. If we are equal human, their misery is the same as the people living in Rakhine somewhere. I belong to this globe. They all belong to me. People living in Canada or America or Myanmar or India or Bangladesh or Pakistan, they're all mine because we are part of the same family. So why should I be more concerned about the Hollywood sign burning and not concerned about what's burning in Myanmar? While I know that people in Myanmar are not going to get any insurances for the big, big building, and they don't have any bank balances, to look at. And then once they are gone, their place is gone, their house is burned down, it's done forever. Maybe one generation or two generations, three generations, they might not be able to find their own house, their own home, maybe. So this is the focus of my work. My focus is just about the other side of story, or the stories that are not that cannot make their way to the mainstream media.
What a wonderful way of explaining. And I just wanted to add a couple of more points as you actually, if I understand correctly, that human rights is a standard which is possibly not equal for all. So you have juxtaposed Los Angeles versus Rohingya, and I do know that just 2 days ago there was another large fire in two of the camps, and almost 100 plus shanty, shelters were destroyed because we have resources on the ground, so they keep sending us all these things. The audience, this is such a fascinating discussion. As a scholar of peace and justice, I completely agree with Aisha that we do, of course, espouse peace and justice for all, equality and human rights, but it varies because of our priorities, and for some reason that is how the world has come about. And we just don't know that why we do not and we are not able to keep a right standard for all human beings. For example, echoing Aisha's discussions before, that Rohingyas are not responsible for the reason or the situation they are in now. They are not. None of us are responsible for our birth, and but we are responsible for what we do in our lives. And in many cases, as Aisha has traveled to Bangladesh, and I'm going to, of course, ask her today how was her experience getting into the camps, because it is not very easy, and especially if you are working as a human rights activist or filmmaker, people do view you as, I mean, differently, as I can mildly put it. And many a times, political regimes, they don't like you to cover the unheard voices, as Aisha coined this term this morning. So we are going to definitely listen from her experience, what she has gone through in reaching out to these camps. So at this stage, the audience, let us view her journey in the camps, in filming the latest documentary. And I'm going to uh, share the screen, and here it is.
It's a world of suffering. All I could see around me was poverty and struggle. Every day is a challenge for them. They have no opportunity to work and earn. They are surviving on the aid provided by the charities. But charities can't do enough. Obviously, it's a big population living up there, and the supply of even the basic needs is not guaranteed to them. They have to sleep without food at times. They have to fight with pain without medication at times. They have to survive in worn out clothing, and we can't even imagine the suffering of women giving birth in these camps. Most of the inhabitants of the camp are physically or emotionally scarred. The trauma is so abundant that it's not even considered worth a shock anymore. For them, life is all about pain and lasting struggle. These children who have survived the worst that can be imagined. They dream of getting enough food or having a house that doesn't wash off with every rain. And this is the limit of their dreams. Their imagination for success can't go beyond that. And this limit has been set for them by the world around them, the world that silently watched and neglected their genocide. These were the moments that left me speechless. While filming in the camps, I was standing on a narrow path made in the jungle with a steep edge on one side. And suddenly someone screamed at me to get aside. I saw four people carrying a thin wooden box tied to two long bamboos. And I didn't realize for a while that it was a funeral. I had never come across such a funeral in my life. I couldn't imagine anything like that. How thin must the body be that could fit in that box? How hard must be the life that people are not even crying while saying goodbye to it? Someone had surrendered to death in the lands not known to him, not welcoming to him, and he was going to be buried in the same lands with no mournful farewell, because death is the least painful and most dignified option for them. What they have seen and what they are going through is much more painful than the death itself. I was walking along a path beside shelters, and children were playing on the path. There was a little girl. I bent my knee to sit on the floor and angled my camera towards her, although I was at a distance from her. She got scared and ran away. She kept looking back and ran towards her shelter, and I realized that she thought I am going to shoot her with the gun, as that's the only scene she could relate my position and my camera with. She had arrived in the camps a year ago. I didn't even want to imagine her experience of life in such a small age. I wonder what she dreams of. Violence, fear, death, the indignity of constantly being in need. What sort of generation will it be? How will we face them as a fellow human? I stopped by a little shelter and sat with its wall to see and try to communicate with the family residing there. And there on the floor I found a little piece of paper with a sketch drawn on it. I could see it is drawn by a refugee child. There was a man drawn on it with one amputated leg. I was speechless. Since then, I keep this piece of paper in my wallet, always with me. In a world where we celebrate art and expression as the highest form of existence, this piece of paper is the most precious piece of art. It was the bravest expression a little hand could do, within the minimal resources available. I wish I could meet and hug the child who had drawn it. I wish I could hold those little hands and tell them that you have so powerfully expressed your pain, that it will resonate in my soul for long. I feel being a refugee is a separate ethnicity. Even if they share the same genetic makeup, or same religion, or same language to the people settled in the lands, they are abandoned as if they don't belong to anyone. Poverty is a separate identity that is not owned or shared by anyone living in prosperity. It hurts me so deep when they are filmed in their worst times. But I have to do this so that I can tell the rest of the world how ruthless and selfish we are, that we can sleep peacefully in our homes in the same world where these people are crippling for the basics of life. They are born in unfortunate lands, and survival costs dignity at times. I'm telling you this story so we don't have an excuse that we didn't know they exist at the same time as we do. The Rohingyas, the most persecuted, the most neglected, the most unwanted on earth.
Thank you so much, Aisha. I think it was very profound, and I'm sure our audience would agree with me. And so now we'll engage Aisha with a little bit of informal dialogue. My first question to you, Aisha, can you share with the audience the challenges that you come across as a human rights activist, as a producer, director of a number of very critical activities that you engage with in bringing the unheard voices, for example, from the political governments, the place you travel to, and so forth. So just let us know, how do you manage all these things?
That's a very interesting question that I ask myself, to be honest. Whenever I am somewhere, like I was in a desert in Pakistan. It's a far place where there were no internet connections and everything. And I told my family that I'm going to that region, but I didn't exactly tell them where I will be. And I was questioning myself, look, why, what persuaded me to come all the way here to meet the people living in a desert where, the child mortality rate was the highest in the world. So that is the bit that, made me travel all the way there. And living in there at night, I was seriously questioning myself that, you know, how, where do I get this courage from? Because either you are very courageous or maybe you are a very low IQ person that you can opt for such a, dangerous choice. So this is always a question for myself. But coming to the point that what sort of challenges I face, certainly there are challenges that are known, and then there are challenges that I do not, pre-assume before going somewhere. And those are the challenges that when I face them, I realize that they are there. So it's not an easy task, to be honest, and especially when I am working on the narratives and the subjects that are not state endorsed, and generally those subjects or those narratives are consciously oppressed by the states wherever I'm working. That makes it a bit of challenge, but you know it I don't know, there is a divine help with me, I would say. Allah helps me always. Just like going to Rohingya camps, it was when I planned for it, it was like a dream for me, because I could not see it being a possibility in any way. At that time, I went there in 2018 in the refugee camps, and then there was in 2017 there was a lot of influx, and with the influx there was a lot of media attention, and there was a lot of NGO attention, and the host community, the Bangladesh government, was not very, not very keen on having people in there due to multiple reasons. States do have their own reasons. There can be reasons how, if even if they are making some effort to keep the refugees there, but there are internal politics, and there are community to community politics, where refugees, it is impossible that any refugee community can be happy or welcomed anywhere. So maybe that is the bit that they don't want to show to the audience, because it gives, in a way, it gives an impression of the whole community or the whole country, that this is what the country is doing with the community. And it always blurs out the positive side of anything that is happening somewhere. So obviously with Bangladeshi government, I was not welcome to be in refugee camps. But somehow, because the people who helped me, if I tell you all the details, it will not be nice with the people who helped me being there. But Alhamdulillah, I made it there. The first challenge is always the state when I'm working on something. Like I worked in northwest side of Pakistan when war on terror was ongoing, and it was a state level ban on journalists to go there. Only the journalists who were taken with the government in their helicopters, they were allowed to visit with the government officials, and then they used to come back. So there was no, like, on ground journalism, no way, there was no possibility. And I had an advantage that I'm not a very big name, very celebrated person, so not everybody knows my face, so I can just, you know I can just go anywhere. So that is the advantage I have, and this is how I worked there. And when I made the documentary and I came back, it was very surprising for the authorities that how did I make my way there. So, but Alhamdulillah, it worked for me. And this is exactly how I worked in Rohingya refugee camps as well, and some other places, especially in Palestinian camps in Jordan. I stayed there for a week or something, and it was so much fear that, obviously, there is that democracy has a different sort of feel, that even if that is the worst sort of democracy, people still expect that there will be some sort of opposition or some sort of defiance. But where there is a kingdom, where there is a king, it's totally different, because people don't expect that anybody will be um, looking for the narratives that go against the state, or go against what is being approved by the state. So this is where I really felt a bit of fear, that if in from here, because I was traveling alone, if I'm picked up from here, nobody will know where I am. And I don't know where I will end up. But Alhamdulillah, it all went well. Generally, the communities who I work for, they are very, very helpful. And wherever I go, I always say that they become part of my family. They become part of, my extended clan in a way. The way they welcome me, and then they keep me. But then there is another side of, this, as there is another aspect to it. For example, if I talk about Rohingya refugees, as you said, I am women filmmaker, and the traditional, I would say, the conservative societies do not really appreciate that, and they are always, in a way, they are not very positive about me. So it takes a long time for them to open with me, that because they are always doubtful about me, who I am and what are my intentions and who am I working for. And 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 a Muslim woman, how can a Muslim woman be doing this sort of things which are not thought to be aligned with the conservative image of Islam. So this is where the second challenge comes. Obviously, the trust building takes a long time. Working with women becomes more difficult because men do not give me an exposure to their women. Generally, as you know, you belong to that sort of community. You know very well that women are, even if they are in Rohingya refugee camps, they can't even feed or provide anything to their women, but they think that they are the guardians of women, right? So giving access to them, it's up to them. And the men, because they are skeptical and they are doubtful, they don't open up. So there is a multi-layered challenge, which you have to go through, and you get trained with the passage of time as you keep working. I have been working in this field for more than 13 years now. In the beginning, it was I didn't know how to handle it, but now, alhamdulillah, I know how you can make your way. I just recently visited. I'm not sure if I told you about it or not. That I just recently visited Bihari camps in Bangladesh as well. So you know very well that it was kind of a challenge for me to go there and not come on the radar, obviously. But although at the moment the government in there is not it's not like a previous government, but still, there are some things that state keep their hold on. So, but it worked for me, and I went there, and then again, it was kind of a challenge to meet the women, reach the women, and the men were doubtful why I'm there and how is it possible a woman whose ethnicity is from Pakistan, how can she be ending up, here? So all this stuff, and then the third challenge is because I am an individual, I do not belong to any media group, no big media channels, no nothing big things. Then if I have got something to share, what is the platform going to be? Where I should present it, how should I take it to the people? Because I know it, right? That's fine, but I'm not doing it for myself. I am doing it to create an awareness about it, to tell the people, look, this is what is happening. So the responsibility is shared now. My responsibility, if Allah gave me a chance to go there, my responsibility was to bring it up to you. Look, this is happening, and now it is our collective responsibility to do something about it. So how should I take it to the people? Because if I'm doing something that is not endorsed by the mainstream media, who is going to take it up? So these are the challenges that are constantly there, and there is a constant battle, I would say.
Thank you so much for sharing all these intimate details. And I think I would like to also add a couple of points with Aisha's remarks about her challenges, and especially in the field of human right activism. This is pretty common that you sort of, as an activist, you have to stand up against state, because when there is a gross violation of human rights, starting from Palestine to Rwandan refugee camps to Western Sahara, where I personally served a bit of my career in 2001 and 2 in Bangladesh, Jordan, you do actually face a state where the refugees are, taking shelter. And as Aisha mentioned, that this is something uh, human rights activists like Aisha face every day. And this is something I wanted to share with you, audience. Here is an example of challenges that is very much common everywhere. And second thing I would say, that particularly with regards to Rohingya crisis, yes, as a researcher in this area for some time, there's I would say a conflict between the host community and the Rohingyas, and it is growing. I think Aisha might be able to comment on it, because she traveled first in 2018, then again 2024, and I have traveled many a times. So there is a conflict with regards to many things, and one is, of course, not to expose the situation, because host community thinks if people like Aisha and others go there and share their plights, their miseries, and all these things, then Rohingyas get privileged, with regards to aid and other things. A very crude example that I saw just very recently is about the liquid gas for cooking in their homes. So the NGOs have decided to supply them with bottled gas, because there is no way to cook in the camps, and there are no firewoods, because the whole area is kind of barren now, just to supply firewoods for the cooking every day. So these are being provided by the NGOs to the Rohingyas. Now the host community is very angry, because host community cannot afford this kind of bottled gas at their homes. So they just told me that, look, we are here and we are also equally poor like them, but nobody is interested about us. You guys come from everywhere, and you are so sympathetic to Rohingyas, and
Mm,
you give them money, and but nobody's talking about us. So because I do come from that area, as Aisha has already shared with you, so I totally understand where they come from.
mhm.
And this is something very unique going on in that area, and especially it is connected with the demographic threat, the expansion of the imbalance of the numbers, right? Because in that part of the area, Ukhia Upazila of Cox's Bazar district, the ratio of Rohingyas and host community is almost 1 is to 8 to 9 now. Nearly 1.3 million of them are in that area, versus the host community is quite small. And this keeps sending a message that they are the majority. If you even open a vote, or take a survey tomorrow, they will be the majority in deciding anything that goes on in that area. So it is kind of seeping into their minds in the host community. And so I'm not talking about any security situation, but this is something that audience you should know, that Bangladesh government, host country, has tremendous anxiety about it. And one more point while we are talking on this topic is the repatriation. The possibility is almost nil as we are here today. As some of you might know, that Arakan army is in the offensive in Rakhine state. They have almost captured 75% of the state. Only the southern tip is left from their military offensive. So actually, we don't see as a researcher any possibility of going back even a small segment of Rohingyas. Now,
Yes.
Bangladesh government ought to think really how to rehabilitate them properly in the society, because this situation is really unsustainable. So, Aisha, my next question to you would be: you have traveled extensively, as I know personally, in many of the refugee camps. What do you see the common features of these camps in terms of, hopes and fears, in terms of future generations? Because in many of the camps, you might also agree with us that there are generations growing up in the camps. It's not just father and mother now; grandchildren are growing up. So, what do you see in general the commonalities of the refugees, stateless people?
This is something very, very extremely sad, to be honest. When I think about it in my free times, this is something that saddens me very, very deeply. Look, something that is common in every refugee camp is the trauma. Trauma of what has been done to them. Although they don't have time to sit down and think about it because life is very challenging for them. They have to, every day is a challenge for them. So they hardly sit down and think about what's happened. But it is deep down there in your psychology. As a human, if we zoom in, every single human is walking around with a trauma that they don't get time to express, and that is expressed in so many different ways. So this is common everywhere. And then, as I said in my documentary as well, indignity of being in a constant need. You are all the time, you know that you are not going to be on the giving end, you are always on the receiving end, rather you are always on the begging end, not on the receiving end, because there are not many people who are keen to serve you with something. You are on the begging end. So there is a default indignity in it. And the communities, and especially the generations who grow up with the sense of indignity, They are very, very different from the generations, from the communities who live with this, some sort of some sense of dignity. It is for us like researchers, it can be a very interesting research topic as well if we want to go for. If you can take me as your PhD student, I would love to work on it, to be honest. That what is the difference between the generations that grow up with indignity and the opposite case. So this is very common everywhere. But comparing, if I make a comparison between the community of different refugee communities that I have experienced with, something very different that I witnessed personally that really, really inspired me was Palestinian refugees. In Jordan, they are living, this is their third generation. They are there. I met people who are there since 1948. So just exactly a year after Pakistan was born. So 75 plus years, right? Some of the, yeah, I met a few ladies who were 80 plus and they could remember that we came here on our father's, shoulders, and what happened there. Obviously, the trauma is there, and this is their third generation. And something different for them that I compare with the rest of all the refugee communities is that they did not give up on their right to their land. This is something remarkable. This is something that I did not see anywhere. If I go to Rohingya refugee camps, they will obviously they are in so much need and they will opt for anything that is being offered to them. If Bangladesh offers them citizenship, they will obviously opt for it. If they are taking a risk of drowning in the sea and going to Indonesia or Malaysia, and Malaysia gives them a nationality or citizenship, they will opt for it, right? This is something very, very different, very, very inspiring, something beyond my imagination that I noticed in Palestinians in living in Jordan, because Jordan was the first place where most of the Palestinian refugees came in 1948 and then 1960s as well. That even if they are offered the citizenship, they do not take it. They are living in the same refugee camps that were plastic tents, fabric tents, and then they turned into plastic tents, and then now they turned into concrete, buildings, and going up and up. Every generation makes another, you know, building on top of that, another story on top of that. But they refuse to take the citizenship because they said that if we take the citizenship in here, we will lose our right to our land in Palestine. So this is the resilience that I could that was beyond imagination for me. This is not what I have seen anywhere else. So this is why I hardly regard them for their resilience. And I would say rather I wrote it in my report that is on I Resist website as well, that the world needs to learn the resilience from Palestinians, that they are suffering, but they are not giving up on their right to their land. I think this is something very important that the current refugee crisis people have to realize, especially the Rohingyas, because they are not welcomed anywhere, to be honest. Palestinian people have sort of a religious, advantage to them that people love them because they belong to the holy place and they have a history of resistance for that holy place. But Rohingyas don't have any holiness to them, right? They are not very highly skilled people, and they are not very much most wanted people. So which community is going to opt for them with willingness? So this is something very important for them, that they should not be losing their right to their land, because the land belongs to them. And whatever happened in 1980s, whatever the parliament decided that they are not citizens, it doesn't make any difference. It's just a law. It can be undone anytime. So they should not give up on their right. Now, right now, we are talking about it as you are talking about it, as a researcher, as a teacher. You are saying that there is hardly any chance, there is nil chance of repatriation, which I totally agree. And just one very tiny fraction of reason for this nil chance is that people have lost, their resilience for their claim on their, land. You should never give up your claim on your land. So this is how I see what is the difference. And as I said in my documentary, poverty is a different ethnicity. It's a totally different nationality. It's different everything. If you are poor, you belong to, even if you speak the same language, you come from the same gene pool, you speak, you belong to the basically same bigger community. Or if we say about the same religion, if you are poor, you are different. And if you're a refugee, there is no hope for you, there is no chance for you, there is no scope for you, then you are totally different, because You are, people know it's not going to be very soon that you will be crossing this poverty line. So this is how things are.
What a wonderful way to explain. And you used a phrase, poverty is a different types of ethnicity. I think this phrase will stick with us for some time. The audience, we are at the fag end of our conversation with Aisha Ghazi this afternoon from Winnipeg and evening in London, UK. Folks, I just wanted to add one more, I would say anecdotally, to the comments of Aisha, that resilience of stateless people like Palestinians that she spoke about in Jordan and Rohingyas in the camps, I completely agree with you. However, I just said that repatriation possibility is difficult. However, I also experienced when I spoke with elderly Rohingyas specifically, they all want to go back to their land, 100%. I have not met any Rohingyas over my number of trips in the camps ever explain that they want to stay in Bangladesh all day long, and they feel that they were expelled, with injustice, and justice should be done, but they want to go back. And specifically, I do remember in my last visit in 2019, I was, as some of you might know who have traveled in that area of the camps, these are little hilly, small hills in that area, which is was actually a conservation site from the government of Bangladesh. But now they live there. So if you walk, you can see farther distance, especially you can see the outline of Rakhine in a distance in a clear sunny day. So I was talking with one of the teachers because I run schools there. So I told him, I asked him actually that why you guys don't volunteer to go to Bhasanchar Island, because again some of you might know that government of Bangladesh, the previous government, sort of wanted that they would relocate actually 100,000 Rohingyas from the camp just to control the overcrowded situation. And they invested quite extensively in an island in Bay of Bengal,
Just
southern
to get
Bangladesh.
rid of them.
So at that time, I told them, because that was the main discussions in Bangladesh. So the gentleman told me very clearly that, look, he said, look, doctor, you can see my village, up in the distance horizon. I said, yeah, I can only see the outline. But he said, "Yeah, but that is enough. I mean, I can see every day. But if I go to Bhasanchar, I won't see that, and that will damage my dream, or that will hamper, that will, distinguish any hope of going back ever. And this is the only reason I don't want to go to Bhasanchar." So I completely agree with Aisha's comments that this resilience is also quite, I would say, visible when I spoke with the folks every time I go. So at the end, Aisha, I would like to ask you, what are your hopes and fears for the future? I know you are working in this area of, I would say, a very distinct group of human rights activists in the world for some time. So, what do you see as an activist in this field? The hopes and futures for the future of these people.
Look, if I talk about hopes, I don't have much to share, to be honest. And if I talk about fears, I just don't feel fearful for these communities who are stateless at the moment. Although I believe, being a lawyer, I believe that the term stateless itself has a default injustice in it. Because how can we be okay about adopting this term that somebody can be stateless? Nobody can be stateless. This globe belongs to all of us. So how can, some people sitting somewhere can say, oh, okay, this is our state and you are stateless? No, 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 no. I do not believe in that sort of border controls and everything. And for regarding fears, I do not just fear for them, I fear for all of us, to be honest. Why do I fear for all of us? Because just, I would say, 50 years ago, or maybe before 1970s, I would say, half a century ago, these people didn't know that this is going to be the fate for them. They were settled in their lands for generations after generations. As you said, they love their lands as anybody else would love their own land, and they own their land and they obviously cultivate their land. They belong to that piece of land, and they didn't know what's coming. Just like 1947, before that, just I would say a year before that or something before that, we didn't know that in Punjab we will be uprooted from our forefathers' land and we will be just kicked out with nothing in our hands. And out of the full families, there will be a few survivors who will be landing to Pakistan and starting their new life. And we have plenty of examples like this. So the people who think that they are very much settled in their lands, this is something for them to think about. This is something because these people, the stateless people, the Rohingya people, the other refugees, they have seen the worst. That can come across, that a human can come across. They have seen the death and destruction and trauma and the worst form of atrocities that a human can go through. So they have seen the worst. So now it is time for the people who think that they are very much settled and this land belongs to them where they are living, and they belong to this land, and they have divided themselves with the certain man-made definitions of ethnicities and nationalism and sub-nationalisms and hyper-nationalisms. This is their time to think about, because we all are, end of the day, somewhere we all are minority in a bigger majority. So if we start this otherness, and or even if we are just okay about the otherness, things are coming to come to us eventually. Nobody is has a divine immunity for that, for an injustice. If you are part of injustice, even if you are quiet about injustice, you get your share. Even if you're not, as an individual, as a community, as a family, as a clan, things come to you. That is a natural cycle. So these are my fears, and my fears are that, because especially about, as we talked about, Rohingya refugees, because they are totally ignored. Nobody is talking about them, and nobody people have actually forgotten that this crisis existed, right? Although 2024 had been a very, very violent year for them due to, as you mentioned, a Arakan army and the other stuff, what was happening. They were being bombed, they were being slaughtered because they do not want to waste their, gunshots on them. So all this stuff was happening, but it was nowhere in the conscious of the world. So they are totally abandoned. So for them, as I compare them to Palestinians, it's very, very different, because Palestinian cause is there everywhere around the world, even if people are Palestinians or not, even if they have ever been to any Arab land or not, they are, fighting for them. But for Rohingyas, it's totally different. Even if the people, if the even if the host community I talk about, they are not bothered about it. Bangladesh is just a little, corner with this community, and there is a long border with India, and there are so many Rohingya refugees in India, and you know what is happening with Rohingya refugees in there. So nobody is bothered about what's happening with Rohingya refugees anywhere in the world. There are 600 people drowned in the ship, and that's it, and it doesn't make any news. So I am particularly concerned that this community is going to be eliminated, and that is a very much possibility. If UN can say that this is a textbook example of genocide, how shameless it is. This statement is such a shameless statement, that you are saying that this genocide is a textbook example of genocide, but you are unable to do anything. 2018 you said that, and it is 24-25 now, and that's it. So we have to be fearful about ourselves, even if the UN, acknowledges and endorses that, oh, something is going wrong with us. Nobody is going to help. So we have to think for each other. We have to think for ourselves. We have to think that we all, if we don't network, if we do not strengthen each other, it's coming to us.
Wow, what a sober reminder. And I think I have never thought about this situation myself, because I'm an immigrant here too. But Aisha, thank you so much on behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute. And thank you also, the audience, for being with us for last 55 minutes. It was a fascinating discussion, and we just wanted to share Aisha's work with you. She's an independent activist, as most of you know, and we are looking forward to bring her work in Canada in the near future. As some of you might know from our posts, that we have received funding from Global Affairs Canada recently to work out a peace intervention in Myanmar. This is not directly related to Rohingya crisis, but it is actually indirectly related, because in this project we are trying to develop a model through which the armed conflict would end. And if it ends, there is a possibility of Rohingyas going back to their lands. So this is one of the things we are looking forward to Aisha, because of her very, I would say, very intriguing works and her insights that she shared this afternoon with us. So please stay tuned, and please do visit Aisha's website for rest of her works. And as I said in the beginning, the website is iresistglobal.org. So please go there, and you can always find her contact address. And once again, for being with us this afternoon, thank you very, very much. And this live streaming webinar session was streamed in our Facebook, our YouTube, and my LinkedIn page. And you can always go and listen Aisha's very soul searching words, and a very sober reminder to many of us who think that life is guaranteed elsewhere or everywhere. With these thoughts, thank you once again. Stay well and stay fine wherever you are. Bye bye.